welcome back. We are today we've got a mentor discussion series with Ellie, and we have Kyle McKelvy of Oregon Outdoor Lighting and Washington Outdoor Lighting, and something new, which I'll let Kyle explain. There's some exciting news he's got. So why don't you tell us a little bit what's coming up for you, Kyle?
So what's coming up from us, I mean, start more like history. So we've had Oregon Outdoor Lighting since 2008 and Washington Outdoor Lighting we started 6 years ago. And that was a expansion for us into a bigger market, a new market. And one of the things that with Oregon, Washington is it's a drivable distance. So Seattle, Bellevue area, which is our main markets, it's about 3 hour drive. So it puts us in the context of driving, you're growing, you're expanding. And so our next opportunity that we wanted to see is how do we have that expansion distance to where it's basically a plane ride. So over the last couple of years, we've been looking at different areas to expand to, and we settled on the Phoenix, Scottsdale area. So
Nice.
we looked at a lot of different ways to organize it, set it up, and we just decided that for a lot of the benefits of like on the work side and the personal side, me and my family are actually moving to the Phoenix Scottsdale area in Gilbert, which is a metro area outside of Phoenix Scottsdale. So we're going to be moving down there and we're going to be starting an outdoor lighting company as our third location in the Phoenix Scottsdale market. So
That's awesome.
yeah.
I'm sure the
Yeah.
next time we see you, you're going to have this great tan, elegant
No.
tank top on, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, hair's gonna be a little lighter, like
Yeah.
kind of that look. So probably stick out like a sore thumb for a little bit, being kind of white, like
Yeah.
kind of pasty moving down there. But yeah, it's a good opportunity. Like I said, I mean, it's something we've talked about for a while, and really wanted to have just lighting industry as a whole. We've always wanted to have a company in like what we would consider a larger like lighting market, which is basically
Yeah.
the southern half of the United States. So
Sure.
excited for that, and yeah, looking forward to the expansion. And so we'll have three locations come this fall.
Wow, that's awesome. I think that's a great area, so you can't go wrong.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's dig into some design questions I'd like to ask you because we have a lot of designers that are interested to expand their knowledge and, their skill proficiencies and such. The first question being that you're one of our mentors, is what steps do you take in developing a concept or a conceptual plan? I don't know if you have steps that you typically follow when you go to a job site, but maybe you can explain that type of process to us a little.
Yeah, so there's two processes depending on obviously the job, and this covers a majority of our projects. And it's you're either working with plans or you're not.
Hmm.
So that's kind of our direct with landscape architects, builders. Well, it's typically like new construction. And when we say new construction, we're a landscape redo or remodel that's considered new construction for us, just because you can get into things that are, I mean, sometimes landscape, a new landscape project can be more complicated than building a house. So that's kind of like new construction, and then just direct with what we'd say, usually direct with a homeowner who doesn't have any plans, doesn't have prints, there's no site maps,
Right.
um, there's there's nothing to work with. So with the one where we're working with architects, designers, builders, what we always like to start with is just a ROM, so a rough estimate of the cost. I think some that's helped us with just the concentrated design time and not waste design time is a lot of times client just wants to know, like, is this a $10,000 project? Is this a $50,000 project? Is this a $500,000 project? So that way it focuses our discussion. So we'll look at it and be like, here's like a good, better, best, but they're just like they're rough estimates that we can present to a client so we know which route basically to follow. Because you spend a lot of time if you're just like, if client's like, hey, I want an outdoor lighting system, or an architect or a builder, and you just design whatever you want, like we like to have more concentrated design path to follow. And it's especially important, I think, when you're not, a lot of times you're not getting that direct contact in the relationship with with the homeowner. So if you're working with a builder, an architect, and a designer, some of those projects we don't even know who the client is. Like we do the whole project and never maybe know who the client is. And we get into some of your more complicated projects, you might have to sign an NDA or something. So like you just never know. Like you may
Hmm.
never have that end piece. So where's our starting point? So here's a rough idea. Here's concept photos. And then based off of where that goes as far as what, do we want to do kind of like good, better, best, or what, is there a allotted budget? Or once you determine that, then that helps you with fixture selection. And then that's all cohesive as far as your design goes. Because sometimes it's, if they want controls, then that's going to eliminate, the complexity of the controls that might eliminate certain products, and that changes your design. So like
Sure.
the I think the reason that's so important for us is just because there's just been like you can waste a lot of time if you're not designing to what like you're actually is available to work with budget wise, client needs, does it like end result. So if you can always get the end result and reverse engineer it, that's kind of like the simple way. But
Yeah.
for like just kind of the more kind of like ins and outs, it's a rough estimate on what it is, and then we'll finalize or then we'll create the design, right? And that could be, so if we're working with prints, the first is just a basic markup. We want fixtures here with the type of fixture. And then once the design is laid out, then we go into controls. Because if this is especially with the new stuff,
Yeah.
so, like if there's like DMX controls are becoming more prevalent. So if you're going to DMX, it's usually like an 8 wire system. So you're not even using 12 wire. You got Lutron drivers, you're coordinating with a audio visual company and usually maybe a lighting designer, electrician. So once the design, then you got to have that control conversation. It's more and more important now because there is, Wi-Fi, but if they're wanting like a true fully automated control system, that's a whole different wiring system. Uh,
Sure.
and then from there, we always do, before we finalize stuff, we always do samples, like physical samples. I think that's really important. And that could be either in person during the day, or that could be a simple demo, hook up a couple lights just to confirm that that's the fixture they want, to eliminate that confusion of what you see online, what you see in a catalog. Looks good during the day, maybe doesn't look good at night. And then from there, we always get on to schedules with installation, because there's coordination with electricians, landscapers, builders, architects, designers. And so that's all has to be done like before we're
Mhm.
even talking about, like, or that's all part of that initial signed contract. So
Sure.
I know that's a little bit more than just like the design piece of it, but this stuff applies like, so then if we work direct with the homeowner, that's a lot of that is just utilizing the off-the-shelf technologies that we have. So Google Earth is super helpful for if we don't have site maps. We have a drone that we use, so you can fly it over the property, take a overhead shots or different angles so you can convey the overall design. And
Sure.
you're just using visual. So you're using photos, markups, to present that to the client, because you're conveying more when it's directly with a homeowner, we're conveying more concept than we
Hmm.
are exact placement of fixtures.
Right.
So
Right.
architects, designers, builders, I mean, that's to scale. That light is going exactly where it is on the plans. Like,
Sure.
but with a homeowner, I think it's more important to focus on like, this is the concept that we're going to create. And then, as opposed to, because you can do a presentation, you lay out a design, and present it to a client. If there's 200 lights, they're falling asleep by 57 if you're going through where every single light's going. And so you're losing that whole just like emotional, like this is going to look cool. You just lose them. So you want to convey more concept when you're dealing with the homeowner. Um,
Right.
and then just kind of how we lay out homeowners things. I think the simplest, like if we're gonna have one thing of advice, is like it's always important for me to present with the flow of the property. So, say it's a long driveway with a circle, like entrance to the house, like we would start at the street as you enter the property, and then like flow around how like the curves of the drive would go, and then presents to the house, and then you'd show the house. So it's like, how would they see the property, or how do they use the property? Uh,
Hmm.
You walk
Right.
out on the back porch, this is the first thing you see. And then you go to your outdoor kitchen, and then you're going to be looking out, there's this nice maple tree in the background. Like, not just here's the design, here it is, but how it would actually like benefit them and what makes sense for the property and how they would use it.
Now, is this graphically on the plan that you're showing them? Or is this through, like you said, if you're showing them different parts of the property, is this like pictures that you've taken during your initial walkthrough or something? Where
Yeah,
they
so
can
we
show
we've
that or
we've used a lot of like FX has a really simple one that people have always, used. You can drop your photo. So yes, we're going to use real photos from their job. But what we do with I mean, I know that we have a very vast portfolio.
Mhm.
So it's rare that we don't have a photo that really conveys the concept of what it is. So we've sometimes used like there's different softwares that you drop the lights in, it kind of does artificial lights and landscape and up you can tone the light up and so, but it's kind of cartoonish at this point.
Yeah.
Some of our more complex ones when we're working with like an architect and we do full renderings, those can be pretty cool. But when it's just like dropping a property photo on, we show them our work and our concept photos seems to have a
Right.
better impact than
Yeah,
just
I think
giving
so.
them like the software just isn't quite there yet.
Sure, sure. But going back to like when you first go in, you immediately try to determine what the budget is or the range. So then that way that you can start creating design based off of that.
Right. So it's reverse reverse engineer is a term I like to use. Okay.
Yeah.
So when this is all said and done, what's the ideal outcome? Right. And then you're gonna go into uh sorry, so reverse outcome, and then that's their wants and needs. So you're identifying their wants and needs, and then you're gonna determine a budget. And then
Okay.
it's just like it kind of I'm surprised by how much people put in a lot of work without talking about budget.
Right. Right.
So
Well, it makes sense. I mean, I think some of the fear or the problems people have run into doing that is that most people have no idea whatsoever on budget,
right.
on it. So if you ask them and they say, I don't know what's the average, and if either they'll be shocked or whatever the case may be, but it's trying to get them to understand where that all falls. And I don't know. I think that's where some of the problem falls with these guys is not
Yeah.
being confident in knowing how to direct that flow like you're doing.
Right. Well, and you like and that is a common thing. So working with a new designer or salesperson, I don't know, like an example is kind of like taxes though. Like you get a tax bill, right? Like we can pay it now, or you can, kick it down the road and pay it in 6 months, let's say, but you still have to pay it. So it's kind of like you have to talk about budget. Like you have to
Yeah.
talk, it's part of every project and like money, and people are just like, so for us I'd rather talk about it on the front end than on the back end, because let's say it is sticker shock, right? Would you rather have sticker shock like at the beginning and still have the opportunity to walk them through the process and go like figure out what they actually want to, well, I shouldn't say want because that's usually just a observation, not an objection, but like
Hmm.
still go with them through the process? Or do you want to put in all this work to where you get to the point to where it's like, here's the price, and then what are you left with?
Yeah.
They're going to
Right.
say yes or no, or most likely they're not going to give you a yes or no, but they're just never going to call you back.
Yeah.
So let's be upfront and let's just be, honest with them up front, and then we can, because everything's custom. It's like
Yeah.
there is no set there's no set number. We don't do set averages. Somebody asks us an average because I mean that's just not, as a custom company, custom designs, there is no average.
Yeah.
So
Makes sense.
yeah.
Good. Well, I was going to jump to this question at the end, but let's tie this in right now because you started talking about it. Was how involved do you let your clients or customers get in the design process? I mean, do you find that that's necessary for you, or is it you just leave it up to them whether they want to be involved or not?
So I mean, in an ideal situation, you would, and this is kind of high level and it's more of a thought process or than it is like an actual thing that happens a lot. But like ideally, like the ideal process would be you create as a lighting designer, you create your perfect design, but they think it's their idea.
Yeah.
Like that would be the ultimate, like, like you get bits and pieces of that and it rarely ever goes that way, but that's the concept. So you want them to be involved. We let them be involved as much as possible, but we're also honest with them. Like if they have an idea and it's going to look bad, then we tell them. And I
Yeah.
think that that's one of those things that people just they get they hesitate on because they're like they want to bring them in on part of the process, but then what happens if they have a bad idea? Then you just tell them they have a bad idea, like
Yeah.
nicely, respectfully. But and we do this a lot on. I think this is maybe a good example. I think we all run into too is maybe you create a full design and the client wants to spend a certain amount, right? And they can't do the full project, and then they start removing things.
Yeah.
So like if we remove that, this is what you're going to get. If we remove that, this is what you're going to get. So let's just not do this whole area and keep one area so it's done right.
Yeah.
Versus here's 100 lights and they cut out 50, but then they keep 10 in this section and 10 in this section and 10 in this section. So we're honest, and then if they really want to design something like they're dead set on something that's just not within our brand, then we'll say no.
Yeah.
So,
Good.
but um, we like to involve them as much as possible. And again, it goes different by the projects. Sometimes we work with lighting designers, landscape architects, to where we don't have any say on the design. We just install it per specs.
Mm.
And we're happy to do that. And then anything that changes or whatever is a change order. And that's, but they're using us for expertise and design and fixtures and everything. Or we just do full designs ourselves. But when it comes like when we do get an opportunity to work with a client, like direct with it, say the end user,
Yeah.
we like to involve them as much as possible. And sometimes they have good ideas. Like
Yeah.
sometimes, I mean, we're not going to sit here and like act like we know everything. So sometimes the client's like, "Hey, have you thought about this?" And it's like, "I haven't." And that's a great idea. And then the back end of it, just from us in the industry, it's like, well, they just added 20 lights to your job. Like,
Yeah.
it's awesome. Like,
Yeah.
we were kind of talking before the call is like sometimes the clients are like, "Hey, if it's not too much trouble, can we add this to the job?" And it's like they say it almost like it's an inconvenience for us to like
Yeah.
make the job bigger. So those are really good. That's always what we're aiming for is like um you want them to just like be in agreement with you on the flow and you're just going to go back and forth a little bit. Hey, can we add this? If we do, then like another thing is like sometimes the client's like, "Hey, we want to add this." But by adding those 10 lights, then realistically you have to add 50 because if we just do this, it's going to look, it's
Yeah.
going to be in line with the design or the feel. So those are just the conversations you have. And I think you miss those conversations a lot if you're not going to involve the client.
Sure. Sure. No, that's great. Good perspective. How about like let's talk about when you're developing a scene or a setting
Hmm.
within like the whole property space, maybe it's one little space or area. How do you approach that from as a designer? What do you try to do first?
Hmm.
What are your steps to fill that scene, make it complete?
So this is going to sound maybe real rudimentary. But one of the things that I like to do, and I it's kind of like when I first started doing designs, I didn't know what to start with. And so sometimes like if it's in a space and it's like, okay, so here's like say a backyard patio area with some landscape and water feature, right? So I'd literally stand in the space from the main vantage point, close my eyes for whatever, 5, 10 seconds, then open them. And what's the first things that stand out?
Nice.
I mean, it's just kind of rudimentary, simple, but it helps my brain at least. Because if those are the things that you're first noticing, then those are most likely the things that you're going to want to have contrast and highlight in the overall design. And so
Mhm.
from a simple standpoint, it's like, okay, here's our predominant features and how do we want to light those to have them stand out? And sometimes it's more intensity, sometimes it's lower intensity. but those are like what I would call like the outline or the structure of the design. And
Mm-hmm.
so, from a basic, just trying to put it into words is like that would be things that we would use, say, a spotlight on, and then we'd fill the rest with wall washers. So you have kind of that
Right.
softer backdrop. But that's it's kind of the basic of how we would start. And again, it's a lot of that's based off of clients and like what's important to them.
Yeah.
So we probably teach and train the most with questions. So qualifying questions, discovery questions with our designers and designers, sales guys. So we train the most with questions. Like we probably spend 80% of all of our from like the design, discovery, sales. It's most of our trainings on questions, how to ask questions, what questions to ask.
Good.
And then that way it's like, okay, so going into this, maybe they have a water feature, maybe they that's special to them, maybe they have a certain tree or plant or pod or something they really like, or and then that becomes the focus of the design, regardless of how the space is, because that's what's important to them.
Sure.
Or
Sure.
architecture, sometimes they import stone from Italy, and it was like from one quarry that was open for 2 months, and they're the ones who got the stone, and so things like that. But you're not going to know that stuff without questions.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I guess that kind of answers the previous question too. Is we want to be really involved, I guess, with our clients because you
Yeah.
don't know that stuff without uh, without talking to them or without having them involved.
Yeah. Well, I
So
think what you mentioned, because what you call like the focal point, or where does your eye go? When I like your approach of where you close your eyes, you go to a main vantage point on the property or whatever the space is, and then you close, open, and then what pops out, where does your eye go first?
right,
Right? I
yeah,
like that because that's the emphasis typically. And then therefore you're now focusing in on that as that's your feature or your main priority. So no, that's a great way to do it. I like
yeah.
that.
And maybe the other option would be like bring my 8-year-old daughter and just put her in the space. Like, hey, what do you see? Because it's just like it keeps it simple. Like it just
Yeah,
I think sometimes we overcomplicate. Like we're trying
yeah,
to do too much with the lighting design. And it's like the lighting design doesn't exist without the physical features of the space. So like forget about lighting. Just
yeah,
what are the cool things about the space is real
yeah,
simple. Like what would I want to see? And then
yeah,
use what the client said. But just it's like I think one of the best things we have in lighting is that we're usually working off of somebody else's good design, like another architect's design, a landscape architect or a designer or a pond company, a pool company. Like they've already done something really cool. So
yeah,
our job is just to make it look cool at night. So
yeah,
I
exactly.
enjoyed that piece of it. So
Good.
yeah.
Now, what do you do if you have, let's say, multiple focal points in a space? How do you determine or prioritize? Well, I mean, I know you can always probably pick, all right, there's one that's going to be like your primary, and then let's say you have secondary focal points. How do you address that or relate the lighting with light levels and things like that to, still keep that all in balance?
Yeah, that's where like transition is kind of what the simple term is like you have transition areas, and then those are going to be like our lower light areas, and then we're transitioning from area to area with either from a design aspect of more light or actually higher like lumen output or something like that. Because one of the things that we have the most here is multi-level spaces. So like
Hmm.
nothing in Oregon and Washington is flat. So a lot of
Okay.
times it's like an upper deck, a lower deck, or like there's stairs everywhere. There's like nobody just has like a big flat space.
Hmm.
And so that's probably the bigger challenge of how to do that without like glare and without because when you're on multi levels, it's hard to design lighting that doesn't like blind you either from top or bottom. Um,
Right.
and so when we look at stuff like that, it's really like, and I'm just kind of visually seeing it in my head as like a lot of times there's some break in the space, right? So when you have multiple spaces, there's going to be a set of stairs, there's going to be a pathway, there's going to be a hedge, there's going to be something like that. So we're
Right.
we're working off of like we'll just call like the structure of it. So those spaces become framed in spaces with higher lumen output, and then there's just transition areas with a lower, softer light, and then that really helps people kind of navigate um, where they want to go. It also
Okay.
kind of creates that destination feel. Is like I can sit here at this fireplace, and I mean, well, some of our clients have two fire pits, like built,
Yeah.
and it's like you can sit here. It's a nice, warm, welcoming feel, but then how would we transition from this space to the next with that lower level and sight lines and everything? So it's really one of those things. It's again, it's custom, but I'd just say it's really like don't ignore like the transition spaces.
Yeah. No, that's good.
Yeah.
Wow. Do you like to do a lot of downlighting, or do you have any preference? I mean, from that perspective, or path lights more so, or how do you, I don't know.
Yeah. No,
Some
that's a great
people
question.
like it, some don't.
Yeah, and I'm not a huge Pathlight fan, I guess. Just personally,
Hmm.
when we do them, I do like higher quality Pathlights. Like
Sure.
you guys are out of California, I love Aurora's Pathlights. Like doing like some of their bigger fixtures. They're really nice. I mean, they're um, but I don't do a lot of Pathlights. Like we don't when they're needed for safety. I like it. But just from like the clutter and the feel, and I just
Hmm.
it's like to minimize them as much as possible. We do a lot of downlighting. It's if you've read the books or whatever, it's not a like I'll give credit to Jeanette Lennox Moyer, but we do like the design piece of like if you do a downlight, you're gonna want to uplight that tree too. That was one of the things that she always
Yeah.
talked about in design and stuff, and I do think that's 100% like accurate in 99% of applications. So but we like downlights for us here. It's like we got a lot of evergreens. We got fir trees. We got some big maple trees. We got pine trees. So those trees all lend themselves really well for kind of a softer feel. So you can do the downlights, kind of like forested paths, that kind of stuff. But as far as path lights go, I'd say probably number one is downlights when we can, and then number two is doing something recessed or with like a small, half-inch top that kind of shoots the light across the path for more of a grazing across the path.
Hmm.
That's more of our approaches than like your traditional like 18-inch, standard
Yeah.
round top, circle top, path
Right.
lights. So,
Yeah.
and it's
Good deal.
definitely hard to like they just, especially in a smaller space or like a long linear space with a bunch of path lights. It's kind of it's a pet peeve of mine. We'll just put it that way. Or
Yeah.
path lights in grass.
Well, they're more noticeable too,
Yeah,
if when you've got the big ones that your eye's going to go right there a lot of times, and then it becomes like a pattern and rhythm. So it wants to follow that more so than maybe something else. And so, you just, causes more of a challenge, I think, from the composition standpoint. So,
yeah, and that's actually like that's a great point because you put it kind of a lot more cleaner than we do. But it's like it puts that artificial circle of light. Like if it's a
yeah,
clean, it just like, and that's what your eye is drawn to. Because it's like the only thing in the environment or the scene that's like a circle of light. So you're just like looking at these circles, and it
yeah,
completely throws off just like your whole like
yeah,
visual appeal of the space.
right. And it can be pretty dominant at
Yeah,
times.
exactly.
Sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, how about towards we'll get ready to wrap this up here pretty quick, but when you're doing like like a site analysis, or when you're first getting started, I mean, what type of information are you interested to collect besides like maybe the basics of like utility locations and such, but do you have like a set procedure, like what you look for when you're first on site, you know?
I mean, so obviously that's like the design piece. So what's our, availability, but really like the big things that we're checking for is going to be power supplies, is where do we have power? Sleeve locations is huge for existing
Mhm.
landscapes, and that's a tough one because there's always, hey, it's here, and then you spend a half a day digging and it's not there. But so
Yeah.
what's our options? Do we have to, what's our access points? So power. And then how are we gonna get power? Because is that gonna be, we're gonna have to cut, is there something we have to cut? Is there are we gonna do a hydro bore? Like, how are we gonna get power to the different locations?
Mm-hmm.
And then another simple tool that we use, which is more and more important today, is you have Wi-Fi testers. So you have a Wi-Fi tester, you walk around the property and it gives you a reading back on the strength of the Wi-Fi in different areas of the property.
Mm-hmm.
So depending on what control system we use, because then that can automatically eliminate any kind of like Wi-Fi controls. And so we know we have to
Yeah.
hardwire it, which now we're hardwiring controls on a closed loop system, which is a whole different process than just throwing some 12-2 in the wire or in the ground.
Yeah. Yeah.
So power, how are we getting it there? So all of our wiring pathways, Wi-Fi signal, and then something we always do like to just double check is like up to the client, but we always like to know, is there any city or HOA limitations
Right.
or
That's a good
rules
call.
or standards? Because a lot of homeowners don't know,
Mm-hmm.
and some of them sign waivers, and
Yeah.
or the rule is, hey, like, you can have this much light for temporary, so like for a party or for holiday season or whatever, and then we give it to them on a switch, and it's up to them to however long they want to run it. But that's their
Yeah.
call. So those are really like the big ones. So yeah,
Good deal.
yeah.
Right. Um,
Oh, I would say one more.
yeah, go ahead.
Irrigation is going to be a big one.
Oh,
I'd
okay.
say for everybody's, and the difference in like hard pipe irrigation usually isn't an issue, but drip irrigation, because I don't know, other parts of the country, I don't know, but here it's usually brown drip line and brown mulch, and that stuff is almost like impossible to see.
Yeah.
Like, just if you're doing any kind of amount of work, and guys are super careful. So if we know they have drip irrigation, it allows us to test it, take a video, and then do our work before we're cleaning up burying. We'll turn it back on, and then we can fix any little breaks that we made. But then it's good communication with the client.
Yeah.
It's good just coverage for yourself, and then it's also like sometimes you turn it on and you find a break that they didn't know they had before you were there. And
Yeah.
we all just know how that works. Like, once you step foot on the property, any
Yeah.
problem that wasn't pre-existing or they didn't know about before you were there, now it's your
Yeah.
problem. So
Yeah. Yeah.
that kind of stuff just helps the whole process from start to finish.
Wow. Good deal. Um, well, good. Let's end it here. I think this was a great discussion, and hopefully everybody will gain some insights on how you do things and what we talked about. I think it was really good. So thank you for your time, Kyle,
Yeah,
and
thanks for having me.
wish you the best over in Arizona. I think that's going to be an exciting new path for you guys.
Yeah,
And
looking forward to it.
I keep us in the loop, and we'll
Yeah,
check back with you. And I'd like to see some of the things that you're doing out there that maybe are different from perspective of design or installation as compared to where you're coming from. So that'll be
yeah,
good.
absolutely. Sounds good.
All right, Kyle. Thank you so
All right.
much.
Thanks, Mark.